I wrote a piece about 8 years ago for GQ, eating turkey in my swim shorts.
So welcome to London Fashion Week Creative Conversations. I've been attending and supporting the BFC's London Collections Men, and then London Fashion Week Men, and now simply London Fashion Week, incorporating both menswear and women's wear, and their first digital platform ever. I'm thrilled to be hosting a series of creative conversations with designers throughout the week and a part of the digital platform. Today I'm joined by Tim Little, Creative Director of Grenson Footwear, a really amazing UK-based company and one that I'm a huge fan of. Tim, thanks so much for joining us here.
Hi Bruce, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
The good shoe right behind you, stating it loudly and clearly.
Yes, well, this has been our thing for probably since the 1940s, and we resurrected it, and we love it because it's such an English, understated kind of thing, you know, the good shoe. As I say, it's not the great shoe, it's just the good shoe, and that's all you need. You just need a good, solid product. So we've been kind of hibernating for 20 or so years, so we brought it back.
I think it's terrific. Well, thank you for joining us in your showroom. We are obviously all still working from home these days and gradually opening up. So I'm glad for the small motions in New York and in London that are allowed that you were able to get to the showroom, because obviously part of what we're here for Fashion Week is to see some new product and also talk about the company. But I wanted to, as part of this series, just bring a highlight to a few UK-based brands that I particularly love and would love to bring more awareness to. I mean, Grenson obviously is very well known, I think, throughout the world. But the point of this series was to, when we're attending the fashion shows, you know, another part of what we do in addition to the runway and catwalk is take appointments and scout brands and vendors. And this is going to be sort of a digital version of that for those who are watching, which I'm really excited about and happy to have you as our first one here.
Great, thank you very much. We're very excited.
When I first met you in New York City, almost like, I would say 10 or 15 years ago in '95. I might obviously been familiar with the brand, but that was in a dinner that you hosted at a place that we lovingly attend called Freeman's, down Freeman's Alley. For me, UK-based, British-made footwear has such a particular aesthetic. I think when people think about footwear made in England, there's such an aesthetic and I think a very great history there. And I think the thing that is amazing is that you have found a way to really play on this tradition of very beautifully crafted footwear, but then also found a way to kind of speak to today's modern client, because there is, you know, it's like, how do you speak to heritage and how do you speak to the needs and desires today?
When we first kind of got involved with Grenson in 2005, the challenge was this wonderful heritage. The brand had this fantastic backstory, but by 2005, it had kind of lost its relevance, and it had become, like some brands can do if they're not careful, they almost become a hostage to their heritage.
That's such a good phrase. I mean, it's so true.
Well, I think so, and particularly, you know, where, especially in England, you get a lot of very traditional brands that have been around a long time. What can be difficult is that you feel you have a responsibility to the brand not to spoil it, because it's been there for, in our case, over 150 years.
Yes, sure.
You don't want to spoil it. So a lot of people can be too careful preserving the heritage and forget that you still need to be relevant and modern as a brand. Otherwise, once you're not relevant, you're out of business very quickly. So for us, it's very much about that balance between never losing sight of our heritage, but always being relevant and always being having an attitude that is kind of modern and contemporary and based on design, not just on manufacture and craftsmanship.
For me, it's a particularly English fashion component where there is particularly strong menswear history in every aspect of menswear, you know, quite historic. Speaking about, you know, the uniforms that were made, footwear, knitwear, Savile Row, but then this equal and important focus on disruptors, avant-garde, young designers that are really, really forging new paths. And I think it's a city and a country with a heritage where both are really equally valued. And I think it's really nice, and I think hard, but I think you really struck a great balance between history and the present and future, which I think is nice.
Yeah, that's very, very important to us. And I think also it's like a very London thing that when you mix the traditions of England and old England and some of these old crafts, but you're based in London and lived in London all of your life, where punk grew up on the streets of London and the mods and the rockers and, this kind of street fashion that comes out of London. A lot of the fashions in the UK have always come from the street and a kind of irreverence to them. So there's that kind of accepting thing of British people where they quite like a bit of irreverence and they quite like you to do something a little bit avant-garde. They kind of appreciate it. So it makes it easier for us to do that.
And I think you created the perfect segue, because something else that I also consider very English is this kind of fraternity or camaraderie among young designers and companies and independent brands. There's such a collegial atmosphere there, a sense of collaboration. And you talked about, the punk era, and you certainly had a collaboration with Vivienne Westwood, and then also young designer Lou Dalton that we're all, a big fan of. And then most recently with Craig Green. And so I love that collaboration has been a part of your company's ethos in a way to kind of support young designers, but also maintain a place in these relevant design conversations.
Yeah, I think I love that part of it as well. And I think, when you work with people like Lou and Craig, they both really appreciate and really love the craftsmanship side of it and the manufacturing side. So you sit down, I mean, Lou was based on tailoring, at the beginning of her career, and still is very interested in how things are made. And Craig the same. We sit down and he's fascinated. Every time I say to him, do you want to meet in the showroom or the factory? He wants to meet in the factory, and he wants to say, could I do this? And can I do that? Why can't I do this? And why? And it's all right, deeply rooted in how the thing is made in that craftsmanship, and seeing that this old craft and this very avant-garde attitude to design coming together. It's really great. I love it. And it refreshes us as well. It's very good for us.
I know the collective mind is always a great thing, having two and more people kind of speaking together and elevating. And you also give a perfect segue to the factory. So the company has been in Northampton for more than 100 years.
1866, I've forgotten how long, it's 154 years now, yeah.
That was the original factory, and then you moved into, there's been 3, and this is the 3rd.
Correct. So the last factory was built in 1895, so a very long time. Part of the thing that I loved about Grenson and love about the old shoe factories is the actual bricks and mortar. The building at the time was state of the art, and was written about. I've got old articles from when it was first put up, and it was a state of the art factory at the time.
Amazing.
But by a few years back, by 2003, and beyond there, it had become really difficult to make a really good product in it. And it was a place where everybody loved it, but people didn't really want to work there because it was cold and damp and wet. And I felt it was important for us as a brand to move on. And again, not become this kind of museum to footwear, but be a modern contemporary brand. So we made the move to a more modern factory, but everything about the craftsmanship and the people and the tools that they use is identical. We just took them and put them in a modern building.
No, I mean, I love that. And, you've been one that has really preserved, British footwear manufacture, as we've seen, factories in all countries, it's very hard to support as they move forward, and to keep manufacture on our shores, I think has been a great thing, and so nice to preserve that. Something that's also interesting, which I like that you've also recognized when other countries or other factories have perfected a technique, that you've also embrace that. Like the company has had a long-standing relationship with factories in India for like softer constructions and slippers, and I love that you've kind of continued that. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Grenson, by the way, is Green and Son. So it was originally William Green and Son. And one of the members of the Green family, who was the managing director at the time in the 1950s, early 60s, decided that the Goodyear welted shoe was very rigid and very solid, which was in many ways the quality of an English-made shoe. But he felt that the company needed another type of shoe as well, a softer moccasin style. And the American businessmen, he went to, I read a letter where he had been on a business trip to New York and seen all American businessmen wearing a kind of Swiss moccasin, as it was called, made by people like Bali, that was very soft and lovely to wear. He immediately went to India because he had heard that in India they made the most beautiful moccasins, and their hand stitching work was incredible and the craftsmanship was amazing. So that's where it started for Grenson. And by the time I arrived at Grenson, there was a very big business they had with this different type of footwear. And we decided to kind of embrace it and say, again, we don't just want to be a chunky, heavy outdoor brogue shoe. We want to be more things, and we've got that in our heritage again. So why not use it? And we found the best factory or couple of factories in India. The quality of their work is just amazing. I absolutely love spending time there. A lot of their product is actually more handmade than English product because basically they have less machinery sometimes. And it's a lovely thing, and they make a very beautiful shoe. And we're thrilled to keep that going. And they can make things like a moccasin that we can't make in our factory. Our factory's always been dedicated to the Goodyear welted type of shoe. So yeah, it's been a really important part of our journey, to be honest.
I think it's amazing the foresight that he had to recognize that the shift in people's tastes, people's preferences, and as you talk about, like respecting the history, but recognizing the need to consistently be moving forward. And I think it's so great that obviously that you completely embrace that philosophy and that way of working, and recognizing, what factory does what best, and I think it's imperative that we continue to kind of embrace these shifting changes and tastes, while also remembering, what the company stands for. I want to segue into us, because we talked about sturdy and chunky, which is, again, you're giving me such great segues through this whole conversation, because that's a perfect time to talk about what has become sort of a signature shoe for Grenson, the triple welt, which exists nowhere else. And most people that know about footwear, maybe we'll give a brief kind of intro about what a Goodyear welt is, but you've created this very signature shoe that's been embraced, and I think of it as very particularly Grenson.
The Goodyear welting is a very old process from the 1870s, 1880s, and it's a way of making a shoe that makes a very structured, solid shoe. And the way I always describe it, I think of it a little bit like selvage denim, in that with a shoe like this, when you first wear it, it feels quite solid. It feels quite, and some people would say even, it takes a while to break it in. But it's the kind of product that the more you wear it, the better it gets. I won't bore you with the construction and how it actually works, but it's that rugged looking shoe that people would understand when they see a brogue or whatever. And the triple welt was a way of kind of saying, we're proud that we're associated with this type of footwear. We're not going to shy away from it. If people are buying a more slick looking Italian Blake stitched shoe, we're very proud of this as part of what we do. So how do we celebrate that? And being a kind of marketing person as well, it's very important when you make a product and put a lot of effort into it, a lot of time and cost, that you can actually see that and the customer can see that. And the factory came to me one day with this kind of new construction that they'd made, a different way of making the welt that made it look and feel like it had 3 different separate welts, like a step.
Exactly, it's stacked, yeah.
Really stacked up, but you could see all of the handwork in the welt, and instead of being finished perfectly so that it almost looked plastic, it was finished with this hand notched effect on the thing, and you could see everything that had gone into it. And so I saw it and I just thought, that is perfect for us to go out and show what we can do as a shoemaker. And it's different, it hasn't been done before, it's been invented within the factory, and it's become a really big thing for us. And it's big, chunky. You've got to really invest in wearing the thing, as you know.
Comparing it to selvage denim is so perfect. I mean, it's exactly that. And I also think, in this kind of new reality we're living in, I think there is going to be a little bit of patience and an appreciation for fine craftsmanship, and recognizing that it may not be the softest, most comfortable thing you put on immediately, but these things that mold to you and you develop a history together. I think there's going to be such an intrinsic value to that, but I also think a really greater appreciation for these things that become a part of your life and take a little time to wear in and to break down, but then they become, I think, your favorite go-tos. And I think that's such a perfect example.
Absolutely. I mean, and people ask me all the time about what we're doing for sustainability. And the first answer is that the company was based on the principle of sustainability. So the ultimate sustainable product is the product that you keep for a long time. As you say, a product that gets better the more you wear it, that in 5 years' time is much better and you love it more than the first time you put it on, is the ultimate in sustainability, because you'll keep it longer and it won't go into landfill. So it's very important, I think.
I totally agree. And I do think that as we've kind of taken a little bit of a global pause, I do think there is going to be a reaffirmation of this appreciation for craft, for the timelessness of things. People will always want beautiful things. People will always want to surround themselves with things that make them happy, that are beautifully crafted. But I think to have this appreciation for something that will grow with you and last, I totally agree. Which is also a good time to bring up, I've been following your hashtag Grenson Heroes on Instagram, which I think is so great and such a nice, I think, apt tribute to the people that really put themselves out on the front lines. I thought, what a great way for your company to get involved to help those. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Well, when this whole nightmare started, there was a lot of focus here on the National Health Service and people who basically didn't have the choice to stay at home and protect themselves. And, they had to go to work. And not only do they have to go to work, but they had to treat people who have got the illness. So they're putting themselves literally on the front line. And my daughter's a midwife for the NHS, and she had one of her first patients way back in April had the illness, and she had tested positive, and then my daughter got it from her. A lot of companies like us were looking for things to do. And it was quite difficult thinking, well, we're a shoemaker, we can't make a shoe for people who work in hospitals. The type of thing we do doesn't work for that. So we thought, well, maybe what we could use is use our following. We have a big following on Instagram and a database and what have you. And we could use that to highlight people who are on the front line. And if we did one person a day and told their story and posted it on Instagram, and then gave them a pair of shoes. It wasn't really about giving them the shoes, although, that was we liked giving away a pair of shoes, but it was really about being able to highlight their story and get them up on there. And then they would get hundreds and hundreds of people would be applauding them. And it was, it just felt like something that we could do to help in a small way.
I thought it was really, really great. And it was great to see the stories and the imagery, and just such a smart way to support and doing something that was what you have to offer. And reading their commentary, they so value it and appreciate it. And I think it was such a really amazing, amazing, generous gesture. I think one of the nice things that's kind of come out of this sort of global pause is having seasonally appropriate items in the store in alignment with the customer's demand. You know, like when it's starting to get cold out, that's when we have boots in the store. And as it's warm, that's when we have lighter things. So I think having the production pause as many factories were shut and delayed, I think having those boots come in August, September makes perfect sense.
I totally agree. I mean, I wrote a piece about 8 years ago for GQ, and it was called Eating Turkey in My Swim Shorts. And it was about the fact that everything summer was arriving in stores in the UK in December. Now, the weather in the UK doesn't get warm until July, and even then it's not always that hot. All of the summer stuff goes on sale before the weather actually gets warm enough to wear it. So it's just bizarre, and it does need to change. And I think, you know, there's becoming quite a movement now about changing it and about making more sense of the calendar. And I think it's about time. It really is, because it's just nonsense.
I agree. And I think it is about, you know, taking time to reflect, really taking advantage of this, you know, kind of forced pause, and really, how can we do this better? How can we do this more thoughtfully? What makes the best sense? And I know the BFC and the CFDA have partnered on their initiative in this kind of the timing and the market, and really making the adjustments that also make sense for customers, but also for that pace of the designers and the schedules of production that they work on that are relentless. So I think it's been a really nice thing to have recognized, and that so many people are coming together to collaborate with that.
That's the key, is the collaboration. I think what this has done, the one real positive out of this, is that people have started to collaborate. And instead of it being just the buyers or just the stores or just the brands or just the factories, it's everybody coming together and saying the only way to make this change and make it better is if we all work together. So it's quite exciting, I think. I really do.
And I think it is, like, speaking about stores, when you got involved with Grenson, they had only wholesale before. They'd never had a store. And you have opened now subsequently 5. And I think it's really great, and we'll talk about that, but I think the need to recognize, like, what an environment for a brand is, and how you can give the best service that you think is appropriate for the brand, what the look of it is, what the feel of it is. Clearly that's important to you, since that's been part of your initiative. I'd love to have more of a conversation about that.
Yeah, well, we feel very strongly that you have to have a real connection with the people. We don't talk about a customer or a consumer so much. We think of them, and it sounds a bit trite, but we think of them as a following, and we want the brand to be interesting, and we want it to do interesting things, that when they read about Grenson, they have a reaction that is kind of, oh, that's interesting, or, oh, what a cool idea, or, oh, wow, God, look what they're doing, you know.
Yeah.
And that be a regular thing, and it to be multifaceted. We want to have a relationship with them, which is beyond just selling them a pair of shoes and walking away. And the stores are very much part of that. You know, we feel that if you have that kind of trust and that communication or that relationship with your customers, you need to have a place for them to go. You know, you have to have a place where they can walk in and meet somebody and talk to somebody and be looked after and see more than just a brand on a screen, or a brand in somebody else's store as well. I think with our retail partners on the wholesale side, I think it helps that we have our own stores. I don't think they compete in that sense. I think they help.
I agree. I think it's about, like, the brand identity, but also, like, being a part of the fabric of the neighborhood. I think it's just about that, and that feels very much to me the feeling of and the mood of the stores of yours. I think they feel, you know, intimate and organic to the neighborhood, and I think that's such a special thing.
Thank you for saying that, because that's what we hope for. That's what we really hope for.
And then the newest one on German Street, I absolutely love, and I think the you know, even down to, like, the palette, what does it look like? What's the floor surface? What's the wall? I think there's such a great setting a mood, and I agree with with you in that it is part of the brand statement, and then people really recognize like, what is Grenson about? Well, it's about this, and also as well as the customer service and the experience of being inside a Grenson store.
Funnily enough, Jermyn Street was the one store that was the kind of most difficult for me in a way. It's the kind of place we were always expected to be, being a traditional English shoe company. And Jermyn Street, for people who don't know, outside of London, Jermyn Street is the Savile Row for shoes and shirts. So it was very much a place that we were expected to be, but it's quite traditional. And I didn't want Grenson to turn up and be super traditional, because we don't do that. You know, we're slightly different from that. But on the other hand, I was worried if we were too quirky, that the customer walking up and down Jermyn Street would not understand us, and it wouldn't work. So it was kind of a bit of a balance, and it was a tricky way. Much easier going to Shoreditch and putting a store there. It's really easy to know how to do that.
Oh, that's so interesting. Like, how do you straddle history and modern times? I mean, that's interesting. I didn't think that would be a challenge, because it feels to me like such an organic representation of the brand, and I do think it's really chic but feels modern, but still feels like there's a sense of history that's evoked.
Thank you. Just such a tragedy that they're all closed and gathering dust at the moment.
Since we're talking about product, I would love to see what you've been working on and what you've been crafting for our upcoming season.
So we're in the showroom now, surrounded by footwear. Am I allowed to get up at this point and grab something?
Yeah, sure.
You might have to work. So this is still a big thing for us, a hiker trend. It's a funny old story, because I won't drag it out too long, but it was about 5 years ago. I was in New York and having a coffee with a guy called Ronnie Figg of Kith.
Oh, he's an amazing guy.
Amazing guy, absolutely incredible. So kind of far ahead of everything that's going on, and like a man of the future. And we'd done a collaboration with him, and I was lamenting the fact that there's this enormous sneaker boom, and we weren't known as a sneaker brand. And I said, you know, it's difficult for us because people are now wearing a sneaker with a suit to get married in, you know, and it's like, that's our job, you know. And he said, yeah, but you're really lucky. And I said, why? He said, well, just the next big thing is going to be the hiker boot. And I said, the hiker boot, where's that from? He said, like a traditional hiker is going to be a big thing. You mark my words. And I went home and we designed 2 or 3 hiking boots. And to this day, it's still enormous. It took 2 more seasons before it became a bit of a thing for everybody.
Yeah.
But he knew it, you know, and we got it. And anyway, so this is Brady. This is our biggest selling hiker.
And I see behind you, I'm going to point it out because it's one of the favorites of our Bergdorf Goodman customer, is the hybrid, which I also think is another way where you've looked at history, but then also modernized, where you've taken the brogue and then put it on a molded rubber sole. So it's like a shoe and a sneaker combined. That's what I see on the mantle there.
There he is.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. Our customers love it. I mean, it's sort of the perfect, what I think is such a signature Grenson shoe is this kind of brogue top and then that really comfy sneaker outsole. It's great.
And one of the things we found was that within our customers, one of the signature things for them that they like from us is the type of leather that we use, the material, the upper material. So where we use this on a chunky winter, you know, commando sole boot, it's exactly the same leather, but we've made a sneaker out of it. And that's a kind of signature for us. So that particular colorway is the #1, is the best seller because it's very Grenson.
Tim, I'd love for you to share some of the CADs for spring footwear that you've been designing.
Part of spring summer, we present product that's delivered in say October. So you hit that colder season and it just works really well for us. So it's kind of, can you see these massive boots?
Yeah. With a big lug. Did you have to develop a new sole for that?
No. So this is it's a great big. It's like a commando sole, but it's lighter weight than a commando, and it's called the 14i, and it's got 14 eyelets, and it's really quite extreme. Below it is a slightly different, again, a shoe and a boot with some detailing on the front that came from our archive that I found, some old shoes that we did many years ago.
Are you doing them in suedes and leather? Is the pail in suede?
Yeah, in the bottom, we've got a kind of waxy suede, that one there. It's this really gorgeous waxy suede. And what a lot of our leathers come from Italy. And this is suede that's kind of, they rub wax into it. And it has this beautiful kind of texture that makes it feel like you've had them for about 10 years and really worn them in. Let me show you a couple of other bits.
Yeah, I love those. I mean, it's so Riviera.
Again, something that Grenson made in the 60s. We made quite a lot of that kind of thing with literally taking a Goodyear welted shoe and cutting bits out of the upper. You know, so they adapted how they could make a shoe to make a sandal.
Like all those beautiful seaside pictures from Lartigue, you know, I mean, like a wide pan and that beautiful shoe sandal. I mean, so chic, super elegant.
There's another shoe and a boot with some detailing on it.
No, but it's almost like it's got a little bit of a sidewall around it.
So that sidewall is actually rubberized leather. So again, it's from a specialist tannery in Italy, and they tan the leather with this kind of rubbery solution that makes it feel like it's rubber, a rubber side to it, but it's actually carved leather. It's really lovely.
Like, it seems like with what we're looking at, there's such a strong focus on the utilitarian, like really strong functional component. I mean, obviously fashion, you know, is inspired by many different things, but I like that you're really delving into the utility of things for the season. It seems really, really appropriate.
Well, it's a big thing for us, and because it's something we do well, it's what we've always done, if you like, and suddenly the trend has gone away from just a white leather sneaker, which we love as well, but it's swung, as fashion always does, to big, heavy, chunky boots and things. And it's what we've done for many years as a utilitarian thing, not as a fashion thing. So it's easy for us to kind of pull that in from our heritage and really kind of make the most of it.
So then where does that thought come from? Like, do you have feedback from customers? Do you see something that, you know, a light bulb goes off in your head? Like, what drives you to come up with something like that? It's a real statement shoe, and I'm always so curious about you know, what the inspiration is, or what that first kind of thought was.
Obviously, we watch what's happening in the marketplace all the time, and if there is a trend for a certain type of shoe, I'll say to myself, is there an appropriate way that we could do that shoe ourselves, that type of shoe ourselves? And again, this sounds really trite, but I've always been a big fan of Dieter Rams. And when he designed for Braun, he would always say, they did a calculator, or, you know, they did various odd products. And he would say, I won't do that product unless we can bring something to the party, something different, something from Braun. And I think that's the same with us. So if the trend is to a hiker boot, or the trend is towards a certain type of shoe, like a sneaker, what can we bring to it? So we can bring a brogue sneaker and make it out of our beautiful hand-painted leather. But we mustn't just turn up and do the same as everybody else. And the inspiration comes from all over the place. Sometimes it's a vintage store. Sometimes it's an old magazine. Sometimes it's something that somebody says to us, like a customer might say, why don't you do a boot that does this, or a shoe that does that? Or why don't you do a sandal? Or, you know, we keep our ears open all the time and our eyes open for opportunities.
I think that's a great kind of thought to have in mind, that, you know, obviously we move in a very cyclical way, and fashion you know, trends grow and bubble up, and that, you know, we embrace them, and or not, you know. Yeah. But I think like to have that in your mind, that if this is the direction we're going, we want to participate, but it's got to be in a way where we can add to this conversation visually, product wise. I think that's a really important thing to remember.
Yeah, and it's got to be Grenson. You know, it's got to be the moment we do something and people look at it and think, why is Grenson doing that? That's ridiculous. It won't work, and it'll detract from the brand. So the final check on everything is even after we've designed something and made a prototype, and even sometimes salesman samples, and we're ready to go to Pitti or wherever, we can get to that point and I can look at it and go, that doesn't feel right for us. It's a nice shoe, but it doesn't feel Grenson to me, and therefore we shouldn't do it. Let's drop it.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And we are coming up on market. Obviously you have your CADs there. Will you be conducting most of your market virtually and with drawings and on Zoom calls, or how are you planning to go to market, I guess we say?
Well, we're still panicking about that. But we're still trying to work through it. We're still hoping that the samples will be made on time. They'll definitely be a bit late, there's no doubt about that. But we will have a full collection, not far off the beginning of the normal market time. We're going to definitely utilize every tool we can online. So we're going to sending samples out to people if they want them, that kind of thing. We're actually talking to people now, talking to some of our retail partners and saying, what do you guys want? How do you want to see are you going to travel? Would you come to the showroom? And we're just getting feedback from them, and then we're going to kind of design our presentation.
I think the thing that I've found is the resilience and the inventiveness with the BFC curating the first European digital platform for Fashion Week. We've had a couple in Asia already, which I think is amazing. So just like the quick adaptability, this has all happened in such a short amount of time. So I find it extraordinary that we're able to do this in such a short time to really get this mobilized, but also just the openness to seeing things in a new way, being inventive, and having the resilience to know that we can adapt and change. And I'm really excited over the course of this London Fashion Week to see how people choose to present their collections, their product. And I think the great thing is there's no real one right way. I think it's all self-determined, and what's right for one company may be different than another, but I'm really excited for the creativity that will no doubt be present. I think it's going to be interesting. And the other thing I love is like even having this conversation with you, I think it really breeds a deeper relationship between a vendor designer and an editor buyer, because we have to trust you that you know what our store is, like that you know what's right for the Bergdorf Goodman customer. Because we have to rely on, drawings or seeing a video of a sample rather than really holding it and touching it and feeling it. And I'm really interested in how the relationship and the trust between both parties can really deepen. And I think that's going to be a nice component of all of this.
I think the word there, trust, is what it's all about, because I kind of feel that for the next season, we can do a really good job with the people we've worked with for a long time, because they trust us that if we say the product's going to be like this and look like this, it will do. They trust us that we'll know that that colour of leather is commercial and works and is the right kind of thing, or that the sole is really, and that level of trust is really valuable. And I think maybe it'll be much harder to open up new accounts this next season where they don't know us very well and they don't have that level of trust with us. And so, trust is absolutely huge going forwards.
And I think to your point, the scouting, like I was thinking how, like part of what we do, going to the shows, coming to London Fashion Week, attending the trade shows, like I cover every aisle. I don't want to miss a trick. I've got to see it all, because that is where we see the new product. And I think that's going to be the most challenging part of this, kind of the digital realm for the moment, because you can't look for what you don't know about. So we have to kind of really be diligent in the search in the virtual world as well. And I think, all the organizations, the BFC included, are going to really focus on how do we highlight the new designers and those that may be undiscovered, because they are going to need, I think, the most help to have their wares and their collections brought to light.
I think that's a very good point. I think what's not going to happen is a new young designer at a trade show or a fashion week or whatever being picked up by a store and them just seeing something, think, oh wow, that's amazing. You know, to find that person for the next season is going to be very difficult for buyers. So I hope and I pray that those young designers don't lose out because of it. I hope that people do seek them out, and I hope that somebody finds a good forum for them to show what they do, and people to know that they're there and they're doing an amazing job, because they're the future of the industry.
And I think we may be surprised, because I think I would love to have someone really like come out from somewhere and really show something revolutionary and in a way that's well suited to this kind of new medium, and then really make themselves known. And I trust in the creativity of everyone in our business to kind of really surprise. So I have faith in that.
Those young up and coming designers who are so creative, maybe this becomes more democratic, you know, this situation where companies, you know, the big companies can't do the big shows with everybody there on the front row anymore. And maybe it's, you know, everybody's the same. Everybody's just got a screen. So maybe it allows them to be equal for a time with the big guys.
A big part of what I get out of going to these shows in all of the fashion capitals is, you know, chatting with my neighbor, chatting with my friends in the business, running into people, meeting people. You know, this sort of the unprogrammed component of it. And I think this conversation is certainly part of that, like how to have a component that is not runway related, but runway adjacent. And I think the discovery, and I know that the BFC is working really diligently to really create that kind of, I guess, editorializing of what we're going to see on screens, because that conversation is important. Like, oh, we saw that show. Did you see that yesterday? That was amazing. Or this new collection, there's a young designer showing, you know, out there. You should really go see it. Like that kind of, those conversations that happen that aren't necessarily clothing that we see, but it's how we kind of find out and how we absorb and being curious creatures. That's the part that we're going to have to support best and really help create here on the virtual realm.
Yeah, well, it's going to be exciting. I mean, this whole BFC initiative is like really exciting because it allows a lot more people ultimately to have a window into our world and more people to see what's going on and see what's happening. And again, it's like more democratic in a way.
I agree.
You could be anywhere in the world and see what's being presented. And that's potentially huge, you know, and if that's something that comes out for the future out of this disaster that we've had over the last few months, then, you know, it's exciting that there is something good coming out of it.
I agree. I think it empowers the customer. It empowers anybody who's interested in fashion to have that information and that all of that out there for anyone who's interested to have a look. I think is really special. Well, Tim, I really appreciate your joining me and the BFC for Creative Conversations. It's been a pleasure as always. I always love running into you wherever we are, at a trade show, during the fashion shows, and having a chat. And I hope our viewers enjoy that as much as I did. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having us and having me on to talk about it. It's wonderful. It's a shame we're not sitting in a bar somewhere talking about this stuff, but you know, we will do again one day. In the meantime, it's been great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye, Tim.